The antique music box sat on the dusty shelf of the curiosity shop, its dark, ornate carvings hinting at a history best left undisturbed. Elara, a paranormal investigator with a penchant for the unsettling, felt an inexplicable pull towards it. It was as if the box hummed with a silent energy, a cold whisper in the otherwise cluttered space. "Interesting piece," the shop owner rasped, his eyes glinting with an unsettling amusement. "Belonged to a collector. Said it brought him closer to the other side." He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound that sent a shiver down Elara's spine. Ignoring the prickle of unease, Elara purchased the box. Back in her dimly lit study, the air grew heavy as she placed it on a mahogany desk. The silence in the room seemed to deepen, pressing in on her. As her fingers traced the box's cold surface, an intricate melody, faint and ethereal, drifted from within. It was a tune that tugged at the edges of her memory, a forgotten lullaby tinged with sorrow. Days turned into nights, as Elara became consumed by the music box. The melody grew clearer, more insistent, weaving its way into her dreams. Shadows danced at the periphery of her vision, and a constant feeling of being watched settled over her. Her usually vibrant apartment felt suffocating, the empty spaces seeming to pulse with an unseen presence. It was as if the horror of Vacui, the fear of empty spaces, had manifested into a tangible dread. One particularly stormy evening, as rain lashed against the windows, the music box began to play on its own. The melody was frantic, distorted, the notes sharp and discordant. A wave of icy air swept through the room, and the shadows solidified, taking on vague, menacing forms. Elara felt a cold hand brush against her cheek, and a whisper, thin as a spider's silk, slithered into her ear. "You opened the door." Panic seized her. She tried to slam the lid of the music box shut, but an unseen force held it open. The melody intensified, and the room plunged into absolute darkness. Elara stumbled back, her heart pounding against her ribs, the suffocating emptiness now filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. She was no longer alone. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the music box, silencing the terrifying melody. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as if burned. In the center of the light, a figure began to coalesce, a woman, radiant and serene, her eyes filled with a gentle sadness. "They feed on fear, on the emptiness you allowed to grow," she said, her voice a soothing balm in the terror-filled room. "But light always finds its way." The woman extended a hand towards Elara. Hesitantly, Elara took it. A wave of warmth washed over her, dispelling the chilling presence. The darkness receded, the shadows dissolving into nothingness. The music box lay silent on the desk, its ominous aura gone. The woman smiled, a light that filled the room with hope. The collector sought to bridge worlds through fear, but true connection comes through love, through filling the empty spaces with light. As dawn broke, casting a golden glow into her apartment, Elara found herself alone. The music box was still there, but it felt different now. Inert, the oppressive emptiness had vanished, replaced by a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. But the encounter left her with a chilling question. Who was the radiant woman, and why did she intervene? Was the collector truly trying to bridge worlds? And if so, what else might have crossed over? The music box, though silent, held secrets, and Elara knew her investigation had just begun. She felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation, a sense that the miracle she had witnessed was just the beginning of a much larger and potentially more terrifying story. The single word, awakened, pulsed in Elara's mind, a chilling counterpoint to the lingering warmth of the mysterious woman's presence. She ran her fingers over the newly visible etching on the music box. The script was ancient, almost otherworldly, and the words seemed to vibrate faintly beneath her touch. Days blurred into a frantic search for answers. Elara delved into occult texts, dusty folklore, and forgotten histories, seeking any mention of collectors who dabbled in interdimensional crossings or entities that thrived in emptiness. She found fragmented tales, whispers of beings drawn to fear and despair, their power amplified by the absence of hope and light. These entities, the text suggested, could be tethered to objects imbued with negative energy, acting as conduits between realms. The radiant woman's words echoed in her memory. "They feed on fear, on the emptiness you allowed to grow." Elara realized that her own fascination with the macabre, her tendency to dwell in the shadows of the unknown, might have inadvertently created an opening. The horror of Vacui wasn't just an external threat. It was a vulnerability within herself. Driven by a growing sense of urgency, Elara sought out Professor Armitage, a renowned historian with a clandestine interest in the occult. He examined the music box, his usually jovial face etched with concern. "This script, it predates any known civilization," he murmured, his fingers tracing the inscription with a gloved hand. The collector, he wasn't just dabbling. He was trying to summon something. Armitage unearthed a chilling account of a cult that worshipped entities dwelling in the void, beings capable of manipulating reality through fear. Their rituals involved creating spaces of profound emptiness, both physical and emotional, to draw these entities closer. The music box, he theorized, was a key component in one such ritual, designed to amplify fear and create a permanent gateway. The woman, the light you saw, Armitage speculated, his voice hushed. It could have been a counterforce, something ancient that opposes these void entities. A guardian, perhaps, drawn by the disruption. As Elara absorbed this information, strange occurrences began to plague her apartment once more. Whispers echoed in the dead of night. Objects moved inexplicably, and the temperature plummeted in certain areas. The feeling of being watched returned, heavier and more malevolent than before. It was as if the single note from the music box had indeed awakened something, stirring the darkness that had been temporarily quelled. One evening, while researching in the local archives, Elara stumbled upon an old journal detailing the collector's final days. His entries spoke of increasing paranoia, of shadows that writhed in his peripheral vision, and of a growing sense that he was losing control of his experiment. The last entry was a frantic scrawl. "It's not a bridge, it's a hunger, and it's looking at me." A cold dread washed over Elara. The collector hadn't been trying to connect. He had been trying to unleash something terrible. And now, that something was stirring. Back in her apartment, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The music box sat on her desk, radiating a faint, unsettling hum. Suddenly, the shadows in the room began to coalesce, forming grotesque shapes with glowing red eyes. The whispers intensified, becoming a chorus of hateful voices that clawed at her sanity. Fear threatened to engulf her, the horror of Vacui returning with a vengeance, amplified by the tangible presence of these entities. But this time, something was different. The memory of the radiant woman, her gentle strength and the warmth of her touch, flickered within Elara like a stubborn flame. Clutching a small, antique locket, a family heirloom said to ward off negative energies, Elara focused on that memory, on the feeling of hope the woman had ignited. She refused to succumb to the encroaching darkness. As the shadowy figures lunged, a brilliant light emanated from the locket, pushing back the darkness. The hateful whispers turned into shrieks of pain as the light intensified, bathing the room in a warm, golden glow. The grotesque figures recoiled, their forms flickering and dissolving. The music box on the desk began to tremble violently, the single note it had emitted earlier now escalating into a distorted, agonizing drone. Elara realized it was the focal point, the anchor for these entities. Remembering the radiant woman's words about filling the empty spaces with light, Elara didn't try to destroy the box. Instead, she focused all her will, all her hope, all her love for the memory of the light she had witnessed into the locket. The light radiating from it intensified, pouring into the music box like a cleansing torrent. The agonizing drone from the box reached a fever pitch, then abruptly ceased. The shadows vanished completely, and the oppressive cold lifted. The room felt clean, pure, filled with a sense of profound peace. When Elara looked at the music box, the ancient inscription, "Awakened," was gone. In its place, etched in the same otherworldly script, was a single new word, "Released." The miracle wasn't just the intervention of the radiant woman. It was the awakening of Elara's own inner light, her ability to banish the darkness not through force, but through hope and love. The horror of Vacui had been confronted not by filling the emptiness with more dread, but by illuminating it with an unwavering belief in the power of good. The collector's attempt to bridge worlds through fear had inadvertently opened a path for a force of light, a guardian against the encroaching void. And Elara, in her initial fascination and subsequent fight, had become a part of this ancient struggle. The music box now sat silently on her desk, no longer a source of dread, but a reminder of the darkness she had faced and the light that had saved her. Yet, a lingering question remained. Who was the radiant woman, and why did she choose to help Elara? Was her appearance a one-time intervention, or was Elara now part of a larger, ongoing battle against the entities that lurked in the void? The silence of the music box offered no answers, only a profound sense that the awakened darkness had been released, but the potential for its return still lingered in the empty spaces of the world. The luminous feather pulsed softly on Elara's desk, casting an ethereal glow on the silent music box. It felt warm to the touch, radiating a gentle energy that resonated deep within her. This was no ordinary object. It felt like a tangible piece of the radiant woman, a silent promise of continued connection. Days turned into weeks, and Elara found herself inexplicably drawn to places touched by a similar sense of oppressive emptiness. Abandoned asylums, forgotten cemeteries, houses steeped in tragedy. It was as if the feather acted as a compass, guiding her towards lingering pockets of the void. In each location, she sensed a faint echo of the malevolent presence she had encountered, a subtle chill in the air, a fleeting shadow in the periphery. But now, she wasn't paralyzed by fear. The memory of the radiant woman's light, coupled with the warmth of the feather, instilled in her a newfound courage. She began to understand that the fight against the horror Vacui wasn't just about banishing darkness, but about actively filling those empty spaces with hope, empathy, and understanding. One sweltering afternoon, the feather led her to an old bookstore on the verge of collapse. Dust motes danced in the shafts of weak sunlight, filtering through the grimy windows. The air hung heavy with the scent of decaying paper and forgotten stories. As Elara moved deeper within, she felt a familiar prickle of unease, a sense of profound sadness clinging to the very walls. In the back corner, amidst stacks of crumbling volumes, she found a young woman huddled on the floor, her eyes vacant, her face etched with despair. A palpable aura of emptiness surrounded her, and Elara could sense the subtle tendrils of a shadowy presence beginning to coalesce nearby. Remembering the radiant woman's words about the importance of connection, Elara approached the young woman gently. She spoke softly, sharing stories of hope and resilience, her voice a soothing balm in the oppressive atmosphere. As she spoke, she held out the luminous feather. As the feather's light touched the young woman's hand, a flicker of recognition sparked in her eyes. The shadowy tendrils recoiled, hissing like startled serpents. A wave of warmth washed over the young woman's face, replacing the vacant despair with a fragile glimmer of hope. Elara realized then that the radiant woman's miracle wasn't just a singular event. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited her own ability to combat the darkness. The feather wasn't just a keepsake, it was a conduit, amplifying her own inner light and allowing her to reach others trapped in the void. But the encounters also revealed a disturbing pattern. The entities drawn to emptiness weren't mindless shadows. They seemed to be growing more cunning, their influence spreading like a creeping vine. Elara began to suspect that the collector's initial attempt had not been a failure, but rather a partial success, weakening the veil between worlds and allowing these entities to seep through. Professor Armitage, whom Elara had kept informed, grew increasingly concerned. His research revealed ancient prophecies foretelling periods where the boundaries between realms would thin, and entities feeding on despair would seek to cross over. He theorized that the radiant woman was a guardian, a being of pure light tasked with preventing such incursions. "Your encounter, Elara," he said gravely. "It wasn't random. You were chosen, perhaps drawn by a resonance with the light, to become an anchor in this world, a counter to the growing darkness." The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Elara. She was no longer just an investigator of the strange. She was now a participant in an ancient war between light and shadow. One night, the luminous feather on her desk began to glow intensely, pulsing with an urgent rhythm. A vision flooded Elara's mind, a swirling vortex of darkness, growing larger, threatening to engulf everything. At its center, she saw a faint, ethereal figure, struggling against the encroaching void. It was the radiant woman, her light flickering. A wave of fear washed over Elara, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of determination. She understood. The radiant woman's intervention hadn't been a final act, but a beacon, calling for aid. The release from the music box hadn't meant the entity was gone, but perhaps that it had found a new, more insidious way to spread its influence. Clutching the feather tightly, Elara knew she couldn't face this darkness alone. She contacted Professor Armitage, her voice filled with urgency. They gathered what few allies they could find, individuals sensitive to the unseen, those who had glimpsed the edges of the void. As they prepared, Elara looked at the silent music box. It no longer held an aura of dread, but of potential. It had been a conduit for darkness, but perhaps it could also be a conduit for light. Following the intense glow of the feather, they found themselves at the collector's abandoned mansion, a place steeped in layers of negative energy. The air here was thick, heavy, the horror of Vacui palpable. The vortex of darkness Elara had seen in her vision pulsed ominously in the center of the main hall. The radiant woman was there, her form flickering like a dying flame, battling shadowy tendrils that writhed around her. Her eyes, though dim, held a plea. Elara understood what she had to do. Drawing strength from the light within her and the warmth of the feather, she approached the music box, which lay discarded amidst the debris. Focusing all her hope and love, she held the feather above it, a beam of pure light erupted from the feather, striking the music box. The box began to resonate, emitting not a discordant melody, but a harmonious chord, a sound of pure light that echoed through the mansion. The vortex of darkness recoiled, shrieking as the light intensified. The shadowy tendrils constricting the radiant woman began to dissipate. Drawing on this surge of energy, the radiant woman's light flared, pushing back the encroaching void. Together, Elara and the radiant woman, one mortal, one ethereal, channeled their light, filling the empty spaces with an unwavering force of hope. The mansion, once a beacon of despair, began to shimmer with a golden luminescence. The vortex of darkness shrunk, its power waning in the face of their combined light. Finally, with a final, agonizing shriek, the vortex imploded, leaving behind only a sense of profound peace. The radiant woman, now glowing with renewed intensity, turned to Elara, a gentle smile gracing her lips. She spoke, her voice like the chime of distant bells. The void seeks to consume, but the light within each heart is a boundless power. You have found yours, Elara. You are not just an anchor, but a beacon. As dawn broke, casting its golden rays upon the mansion, the radiant woman began to fade, her form becoming one with the light. The luminous feather in Elara's hand dimmed, its urgent pulse subsiding, replaced by a steady warmth. The collector's mansion no longer felt like a place of dread, but a place where darkness had been confronted and overcome. The horror of Vacui had been banished, replaced by the quiet hum of hope. Elara knew her journey wasn't over. The void might slumber, but it would likely awaken again. But now, she wasn't afraid. She had found her light, and she knew that as long as even a single spark of hope remained, the darkness could never truly win. The whispered word, "Return," hung in the air of the once desolate mansion, a chilling counterpoint to the hard-won peace. Elara felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The victory had been profound, but perhaps temporary. The void, it seemed, was not so easily vanquished. Professor Armitage, pale and shaken by the lingering echo of the whisper, consulted his ancient texts with renewed urgency. He discovered fragmented lore speaking of entities from the void, possessing a cyclical nature, capable of being banished but destined to eventually seek re-entry into the mortal realm, often through different conduits, or by exploiting new pockets of emptiness. The music box. It was a focal point, he theorized, his voice hushed. Destroying it might have scattered their influence, but it didn't eradicate them entirely. The whisper, it suggests a consciousness, a will determined to breach our world again. Elara found herself more attuned to the subtle shifts in her environment. The air in certain places felt heavier, the shadows deeper. The luminous feather, though now dimmed, would occasionally flicker with a faint warning pulse. It was as if the residual energy of the void was testing the boundaries, probing for weaknesses. Driven by this growing unease, Elara began to study the nature of emptiness itself. She realized it wasn't just the absence of physical objects, but the lack of connection, the erosion of hope, the silence where empathy should reside. These were the fertile grounds where the entities of the void could take root and flourish. Her focus shifted from confronting overt manifestations of darkness to nurturing light and connection in the world. She volunteered at community centers, offering support and a listening ear to those struggling with isolation and despair. She sought out forgotten stories of resilience and shared them, weaving threads of hope into the fabric of everyday life. But the subtle signs of the void's return persisted. Strange occurrences, dismissed by others as mere anomalies, began to plague the city. A sudden drop in temperature in a crowded room, a fleeting glimpse of a distorted figure in a mirror, a collective feeling of unease settling over certain neighborhoods. One evening, the luminous feather pulsed with an intensity it hadn't displayed since the confrontation at the mansion. Elara was drawn to an old, neglected theater, its once grand facade now crumbling, its interior shrouded in darkness and silence. The air within felt stagnant, heavy with a profound sense of loss and forgotten dreams. As she moved through the decaying auditorium, she sensed a presence far more potent than the lingering echoes she had encountered before. The shadows here writhed with a subtle animation, and the silence pressed in on her, laced with a faint, chilling whisper that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the building. In the center of the stage, a figure began to materialize. Not the grotesque shadows of before, but a being of cold, elegant beauty, its eyes like chips of obsidian, radiating an aura of profound emptiness. It spoke, its voice a silken caress that sent shivers down Elara's spine. The void remembers, and it seeks what was lost. Elara recognized a new level of intelligence, a cunning that had been absent in the previous manifestations. This entity wasn't just feeding on fear, it seemed to be manipulating it, weaving it into a tapestry of despair. Remembering the radiant woman's words about the boundless power of the light within, Elara focused her will, drawing on the warmth of the feather and the connections she had forged in the world. A soft golden light emanated from her, pushing back the encroaching shadows. The elegant entity regarded her with cold amusement. "Your light is fleeting, mortal. The emptiness is eternal." The battle was different this time. It wasn't a brute force confrontation, but a subtle war of influence. The entity preyed on Elara's doubts, whispering insidious thoughts of futility and despair, trying to extinguish her inner light. But Elara held firm, her resolve strengthened by the memory of the radiant woman and the faces of those she had helped. She realized that the true weapon against the void wasn't just raw power, but unwavering hope and the strength of human connection. As the entity's influence grew stronger, the theater itself began to respond, its decaying structure groaning and shifting, the shadows deepening, threatening to engulf her. Elara understood that the theater, steeped in forgotten dreams and unfulfilled potential, had become a new focal point for the void's return. Suddenly, a chorus of voices echoed through the theater, the voices of the people Elara had connected with, their words of hope and resilience resonating with her. Their collective light, though unseen, bolstered her own. Empowered by this unexpected support, Elara focused her light, not outwards in a blinding flash, but inwards, strengthening her own resolve. She understood that the true battle against the horror of Vacui was fought not in the external world, but within the human heart. As her inner light intensified, it began to resonate with the theater itself, awakening the echoes of the joy and creativity that had once filled its space. The oppressive silence began to break, replaced by faint whispers of laughter and music from the past. The elegant entity recoiled, its obsidian eyes widening with something akin to surprise. Its power, fueled by emptiness and despair, began to wane in the face of this resurgence of hope and connection. With a final, chilling sigh, the entity dissolved into the shadows, leaving behind a theater that felt subtly different, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The luminous feather in Elara's hand pulsed with a steady, reassuring warmth. The whispered word, "return," no longer echoed with immediate threat, but with a sense of inevitability. The void would likely try again, seeking new avenues to breach the world. But now, Elara knew they weren't defenseless. The light within humanity, when kindled and shared, was a force even the eternal emptiness could not ultimately extinguish. Her role had evolved. She was no longer just investigating the darkness. She was actively cultivating the light, tending to the connections that formed a bulwark against the void. The miracle of the radiant woman had awakened not just her own inner light, but the potential for light within the collective human spirit. The battle against the horror of Vacui was ongoing, a constant vigilance. But now, humanity had a fighting chance. The haunting melody drifting from the pristine music box in the spotlight filled the revitalized theater with an unsettling dissonance. It was the same tune that had first drawn Elara into this terrifying journey. Yet it now carried a subtle, insidious sweetness, like a siren's call luring sailors to their doom. The pristine condition of the box was equally disturbing, as if time itself had no hold on it, or as if it had been meticulously restored by an unseen hand. A cold dread washed over Elara. The void wasn't just seeking to return. It was learning, adapting, perhaps even mimicking the very things that represented light and connection. The familiar melody, once a trigger for fear, now felt like a twisted invitation. Professor Armitage, who had accompanied Elara, looked at the music box with a mixture of fascination and terror. "It's as if it's been cleansed," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. But by what? And for what purpose? As the melody continued to weave its spell, Elara felt a strange pull towards the stage, a nostalgic ache that tugged at the edges of her memory. It was as if the music was resonating with something deep within her, stirring forgotten emotions and half-formed desires. She realized with a chilling clarity that the void wasn't just about emptiness. It was also about exploiting vulnerabilities, the unfulfilled longings and hidden shadows that resided within the human heart. The music box, seemingly cleansed, was now a key, unlocking those hidden recesses. Suddenly, images flickered in Elara's mind, fleeting glimpses of a life she didn't recognize, filled with warmth, laughter, and a profound sense of belonging. The melody intensified, and the images became more vivid, more alluring. A voice, soft and persuasive, whispered in her thoughts, promising solace and reunion in a realm beyond sorrow and fear. Elara staggered back, clutching the now steadily warm feather. She recognized the insidious trap. The void wasn't just returning. It was offering an escape, a false paradise built on illusion, designed to lure the living into its embrace. "It's preying on hope, twisting it," she gasped, her voice strained. "It's offering a false light to draw us into the true darkness." They realized that the theater itself was becoming a conduit, its revitalized state somehow amplifying the music box's influence. The echoes of joy and creativity were being subtly corrupted, twisted into a seductive lure. Working quickly, Elara and Professor Armitage, along with their small group of allies, tried to disrupt the music's influence. They filled the theater with sounds of genuine joy, singing, laughter, stories of love and resilience. But the haunting melody persisted, a constant undertone that seemed to weave its way through their efforts. As the music reached a crescendo, the figure of the elegant entity reappeared on the stage, its form now shimmering with an almost ethereal beauty. Its obsidian eyes held a chilling triumph. "You cannot fight what you desire," it purred, its voice resonating with the seductive melody. "Embrace the emptiness and find peace." Elara felt the allure of its words, the pull of the false memories, threatening to overwhelm her. But then, she focused on the faces of the people she had helped, the genuine warmth in their eyes, the real connections they had forged. The true light, she realized, wasn't a fantastical escape, but the messy, vibrant reality of human connection. Drawing strength from this realization, Elara held the luminous feather aloft. This time, instead of a beam of light, it emitted a wave of pure, unwavering truth. The seductive melody faltered, the false memories in her mind dissolved, and the elegant entity's beautiful facade flickered, revealing the cold emptiness beneath. The theater itself seemed to react to the wave of truth. The pristine music box began to crack, its surface spiderwebbing with fissures. The air, once thick with seductive illusion, now felt sharp and clear. The elegant entity shrieked, its beautiful form dissolving into a vortex of shadow. The music box shattered into 1,000 pieces, its haunting melody silenced forever. The oppressive atmosphere in the theater lifted, replaced by a sense of clarity and renewed purpose. But the encounter left them with a profound understanding of the void's insidious nature. It wasn't just a force of destruction, it was a master manipulator, capable of exploiting the deepest desires and vulnerabilities of the human heart. The return wasn't just about brute force, it was about subtle infiltration, a seductive whisper in the darkness. As they left the theater, now truly cleansed, Elara knew that their vigilance had to be constant. The void would likely seek new ways to return, new illusions to weave. But now, they were armed with a deeper understanding of its tactics, and a stronger conviction in the power of truth and genuine connection. The battle against a horror vacui was not a single confrontation, but an ongoing commitment to nurturing the light within themselves and in the world around them, ensuring that the empty spaces never again became fertile ground for despair. The innocent-sounding giggle emanating from the mundane music box in the alleyway struck a chord of primal unease within Elara. It was a stark contrast to the haunting melody of the antique, a chillingly childlike sound that hinted at a new, perhaps even more insidious form of the void's influence. The ordinariness of the box itself was unsettling, suggesting a shift in tactics, a deliberate attempt to conceal its malevolent nature within the commonplace. Professor Armitage, his face etched with concern, cautiously approached the discarded toy. This is different," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's unassuming, almost innocent." As he reached for it, Elara instinctively held him back. "Don't," she warned, her senses on high alert. "It's a disguise." The giggle came again, slightly louder this time, laced with a subtle undercurrent of malice. It was a sound designed to disarm, to evoke a sense of harmlessness, but Elara felt the cold tendrils of the void reaching out from it. They observed the music box from a distance. After a few moments, a small, translucent figure flickered into existence beside it, a childlike silhouette with empty black eyes. It reached out a spectral hand towards the box, and the giggling intensified. "It's targeting innocence," Elara realized with a sickening lurch in her stomach, exploiting the purest form of vulnerability. This new approach was far more disturbing than the overt terror they had faced before. It suggested a deeper understanding of human psychology, a willingness to corrupt the very essence of joy and trust. Over the next few days, similar occurrences were reported across the city. Fleeting giggles in quiet places, children's toys moving inexplicably, a sudden feeling of cold dread in playgrounds. The void was subtly infiltrating the fabric of everyday life, using innocence as a Trojan horse. Elara and Professor Armitage realized they had to adapt their methods. Confronting this new threat with direct force might only amplify the fear and inadvertently empower the entities. Instead, they focused on nurturing genuine joy and connection, particularly among children. They organized community events filled with laughter, music, and shared experiences, hoping to create a shield of positive energy against the void's insidious influence. Elara found herself drawn to a local orphanage, a place filled with both vulnerability and resilience. The children there, despite their hardships, possessed an innate capacity for joy that Elara found both inspiring and fragile. It was here that the void's presence felt particularly acute, subtle whispers and fleeting shadows lurking at the edges of their laughter. One young girl, no older than 7, named Lily, seemed particularly sensitive. She would often speak of shadow friends, who whispered secrets and offered enticing but ultimately unsettling promises. Elara recognized the void's manipulative tactics, preying on Lily's loneliness and imagination. Elara spent time with Lily, sharing stories of courage and hope, patiently unraveling the void's subtle lies. She taught her to recognize the difference between genuine joy and the hollow allure of the shadow friends. Slowly, Lily began to trust Elara, her bright spirit pushing back against the encroaching darkness. But the void was persistent. One night, the orphanage was enveloped in an unnatural stillness. The air grew cold, and the faint sound of children's giggling, distorted and malevolent, echoed through the halls. The toys in the playroom began to move on their own, their innocent forms twisted into grotesque parodies. Elara and Professor Armitage knew this was a direct assault, a concentrated effort to break the children's spirit and establish a stronger foothold in their world. They gathered the children, surrounding them with light and warmth, sharing stories and songs of hope. As the distorted giggling intensified, Lily, holding Elara's hand, began to sing a simple, joyful melody she had learned. One by one, the other children joined in, their innocent voices rising in defiance against the encroaching darkness. The effect was immediate and profound. The moving toys stilled, the cold receded, and the malevolent giggling faded away, replaced by the pure, unadulterated sound of children's laughter. The void, it seemed, could not abide genuine joy, especially when it emanated from the very innocence it sought to corrupt. The translucent, childlike figure reappeared, its empty black eyes fixed on Lily. It reached out a spectral hand, but Lily, emboldened by Elara's presence and the collective joy of her friends, stood firm. "You're not real," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You're just emptiness." The figure recoiled, its form flickering and dissolving as the children's laughter filled the room. The ordinary music box in the alleyway outside fell silent. Elara realized that the fight against the horror Vacui was not just about confronting darkness, but about actively cultivating light, especially in the hearts of the most vulnerable. The void might adapt and change its tactics, but the pure, uncorrupted joy of innocence was a powerful weapon against its insidious influence. Their vigilance remained, but now they understood that their greatest strength lay not in fighting shadows, but in nurturing the light. The giggling music box served as a stark reminder that the void would always seek new avenues, but the resilience of the human spirit, especially the untainted joy of children, was a miracle in itself, a beacon that could always pierce the darkness. The seemingly innocent drawing in Lily's hand sent a fresh wave of unease through Elara. The radiant light surrounding the children offered a sense of hope, a testament to their resilience. Yet, the subtle inclusion of the unassuming music box and the single, stark black tear hinted at a lingering presence, a shadow that even the brightest joy couldn't entirely dispel. It was a chilling reminder that the void's touch, once felt, might leave unseen scars, subtle vulnerabilities waiting to be exploited. Elara knelt beside Lily, her heart heavy. "That's a beautiful drawing, Lily," she said gently. "Tell me about the little music box in the corner." Lily's smile faltered slightly. "It's just a quiet box," she murmured, her gaze drifting towards the window. "Sometimes, when everyone is asleep, I think I hear it. Just a little sigh. A sigh, not a giggle, not a haunting melody, but a sigh." It was a new tactic, a subtle manifestation of sorrow, perhaps designed to erode the very joy they had fought so hard to protect. The void, it seemed, was learning to be patient, to sow seeds of despair in the quiet moments. Elara and Professor Armitage intensified their efforts, focusing on providing emotional support and fostering open communication, particularly among the children at the orphanage. They encouraged them to share their feelings, their fears, even the quietest sighs they might hear in the stillness of the night. They also delved deeper into the lore surrounding the void entities, discovering that they were often drawn to places or individuals marked by significant emotional trauma or unresolved grief. The lingering sadness in such places acted as an invitation, a resonance that amplified their influence. Elara began to explore the history of the orphanage itself, uncovering tales of loss and separation that had permeated its walls over the years. It was a fertile ground for the void's subtle incursions, the collective sorrow acting as a low hum that the entities could latch onto. Their approach shifted from direct confrontation to creating an environment of unwavering support and empathy, a space where even the smallest hint of darkness could be brought into the light and addressed. They organized art therapy sessions, storytelling circles, and quiet moments of reflection, aiming to heal the lingering emotional wounds and fortify the children's inner resilience. Slowly, the atmosphere in the orphanage began to shift. The children became more open, sharing their quiet sighs and fleeting moments of unease. They learned to identify the difference between their own feelings and the subtle intrusions of the void. The black tears in their drawings became less frequent, replaced by vibrant colors and expressions of joy. But Elara knew the vigilance couldn't waver. The void's influence might be subtle, but it was persistent. One afternoon, while helping the children tend the small garden they had created, a sudden, unnatural chill swept through the air. The flowers drooped momentarily, their vibrant colors dimming. A collective sigh seemed to ripple through the children, a wave of inexplicable sadness. In the center of the garden, a patch of earth began to darken. A small, unassuming music box, identical to the one Lily had drawn, slowly rose from the soil. It emitted no sound, but an overwhelming feeling of despair emanated from it, a silent weight pressing down on their spirits. This was a direct, albeit subtle, attack. The void was targeting the very source of their joy, the life and growth they were nurturing. Remembering the radiant woman's words about the boundless power of the light within each heart, Elara didn't try to destroy the box. Instead, she encouraged the children to focus on the life around them, the warmth of the sun, the vibrant colors of the flowers, the feel of the earth in their hands. They sang songs of growth and renewal, their voices rising in a chorus of life-affirming energy. As their collective focus shifted to the positive, the darkness surrounding the music box began to recede. The flowers in the garden seemed to regain their vibrancy. The silent weight of despair lifted. The music box sank back into the earth, disappearing without a trace. Elara understood then that the battle against the horror of Vacui was not always about dramatic confrontations. Often it was a quiet, persistent effort to nurture light and hope in the face of subtle, insidious darkness. The void sought to exploit emptiness and despair, but the human spirit, when connected and nurtured, possessed an inherent resilience, a natural inclination towards light and growth. The black tear in Lily's drawing remained a potent symbol, a reminder of the void's persistent presence, but it also represented the children's awareness, their ability to acknowledge the darkness without succumbing to it. They were learning to cultivate their inner light, to recognize the subtle sighs of despair, and to counter them with the vibrant song of life. The miracle wasn't a one-time event, but an ongoing process of healing, connection, and the unwavering cultivation of hope in the face of persistent shadow. Lily's whispered words hung heavy in the quiet of the dormitory, a chilling counterpoint to the peaceful slumber of the other children. "It's coming from inside your light." The notion was deeply unsettling, striking at the very core of Elara's sense of security. The antique locket, a tangible link to her family's protective energies, had always been a source of comfort and a silent guardian. The idea that the void's influence could even this sacred object sent a shiver of icy dread down her spine. Elara held the locket, its smooth, cool surface suddenly feeling alien. She listened intently, straining her senses, but heard nothing beyond the gentle rhythm of the children's breathing. Yet Lily's innocent fear was palpable, her sensitivity to the unseen a truth Elara had come to trust. Returning to Professor Armitage, Elara shared Lily's unsettling observation. He examined the locket with a grave expression, his fingers tracing its intricate carvings. "Heirlooms like this, they can absorb energies, both benevolent and malevolent," he mused, his voice low. "If the void has found a way to latch onto its protective aura," they delved into ancient texts detailing methods of spiritual contamination, instances where negative entities had infiltrated objects of power or sentimental value. The lore spoke of a slow, insidious process, a gradual corruption that could turn a source of light into a conduit for darkness. The sigh Lily had heard might be the void's initial tendril, a subtle infiltration testing the locket's defenses. Elara began to experience subtle anomalies around the locket. At times it felt strangely cold against her skin. Fleeting shadows seemed to flicker at its periphery. In her dreams, the familiar warmth of her family's presence was replaced by a chilling emptiness. The void, it seemed, was targeting her directly, attempting to undermine her ability to protect others by corrupting her own source of strength. The thought was both terrifying and galvanizing. She couldn't allow the darkness to take root within her most cherished connection to light. Working with Professor Armitage, Elara embarked on a ritual of cleansing, using ancient herbs, focused intention, and the collective positive energy of the orphanage community. They bathed the locket in moonlight, chanted protective verses, and surrounded it with symbols of light and resilience. During the ritual, Elara felt a subtle resistance, a cold whisper trying to dissuade her, but the combined strength of their intentions, the unwavering hope of the children, and Elara's own fierce resolve pushed back against the encroaching darkness. As the ritual concluded, the locket felt different. The coldness had vanished, replaced by a familiar warmth, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible vibration, a sense of heightened awareness. Lily, who had watched the ritual with wide, solemn eyes, touched the locket gently. "It feels awake," she whispered. Elara realized that the void's attempt to corrupt the locket had inadvertently strengthened it, forging a deeper connection to the protective energies it represented. The darkness had tested the light and found it resilient. However, the experience served as a stark reminder of the void's adaptability and its willingness to exploit even the most trusted sources of strength. The sigh might have been silenced, but the attempt revealed a new level of cunning, a willingness to attack from within. The fragile peace that had settled over the orphanage was now tinged with a renewed sense of vigilance. Elara knew that the void's focus had shifted. It was no longer just about creating emptiness in the room. It was about undermining the very sources of light that stood against it. The final confrontation, she sensed, was drawing closer. The void's tactics were becoming more personal, more direct. The battleground was no longer just the empty spaces of the world, but the very hearts and souls of those who dared to carry the light. The locket, now awake, felt like a silent promise, a source of strength for the trials to come, a beacon against the encroaching darkness that sought to extinguish even the faintest glimmer of hope from within. The fleeting shadow within the locket's polished surface, the chillingly familiar childlike giggle seemingly emanating from within her most trusted protection. The realization struck Elara with the force of a physical blow. The void wasn't just attacking from without. It had found a way to infiltrate her very being, using the corrupted locket as a bridge. The thought of that insidious darkness taking root within her own light, was a violation more profound and terrifying than anything she had faced before. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but the faces of the children at the orphanage, their innocent trust anchored her. She couldn't succumb to this internal invasion. She had to fight, not just for herself, but for the fragile hope she had helped to cultivate. Professor Armitage, witnessing Elara's distress, examined the locket with a horrified fascination. It's mirroring the void," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "It's become a focal point, drawing its energy inward." They understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just an external threat. It was a battle for Elara's very soul. The void was attempting to corrupt her from the inside out, to turn her into a conduit for its darkness. The giggling intensified, now a constant, insidious whisper in the back of Elara's mind, laced with taunting suggestions of despair and isolation. The shadows around her seemed to deepen, responding to the darkness within the locket. She felt a growing detachment from the warmth and light she had cultivated, a chilling emptiness threatening to consume her from within. Sleep offered no respite. Her dreams were filled with swirling blackness and the mocking laughter of the void. She felt her resolve weakening, the weight of the encroaching darkness pressing down on her spirit. But amidst the encroaching despair, the memory of the radiant woman flickered like a stubborn flame. Her gentle strength, her unwavering belief in the power of inner light, resonated within Elara, a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. Drawing on this memory, Elara made a desperate decision. She couldn't fight the void from the outside, while it was festering within. She had to confront it at its source, within the corrupted locket itself. With Professor Armitage's guidance and the collective support of the orphanage community, Elara prepared for a perilous internal journey. Using a meditative trance and ancient visualization techniques, she sought to enter the locket's spiritual space, to confront the darkness that had taken root within her light. The journey was harrowing. She found herself in a desolate landscape mirroring the void, filled with whispering shadows and the mocking giggles that echoed in her mind. At the center of this darkness, she saw a distorted reflection of herself, its eyes empty and black, a chilling manifestation of the void's influence. The distorted figure reached out, its touch icy and draining, whispering promises of oblivion and release from the pain of the world. The allure was strong, the temptation to succumb to the emptiness almost overwhelming. But then Elara focused on the warmth of the real locket against her chest, the tangible link to the love and hope she had shared with the children. She remembered Lily's innocent trust, Professor Armitage's unwavering support, the radiant woman's gentle strength. These connections were her anchors, tethering her to the light. Drawing on this inner strength, Elara projected her own light outwards, not as a weapon, but as a beacon of truth and love. The distorted reflection recoiled, hissing in the face of this genuine light. The whispering shadows faltered, and the mocking giggles began to dissipate. The desolate landscape around her began to shift, the oppressive darkness receding, replaced by faint glimmers of warmth and color. The corrupted locket's internal space was beginning to heal, responding to the unwavering power of Elara's inner light. With a final surge of will, Elara confronted the core of the void's influence within the locket, not with force, but with an overwhelming wave of forgiveness and compassion. The distorted reflection shimmered and dissolved, its icy grip on her spirit finally broken. Elara returned to consciousness, gasping for breath, but feeling a profound sense of liberation. The coldness within her had vanished, replaced by a renewed warmth. The giggling in her mind was gone. The locket against her chest pulsed with a steady, comforting light. Lily, sensing the shift, rushed to Elara and hugged her tightly. "The shadows are gone," she whispered, her eyes bright with relief. "Your light is strong again." The final battle against the horror of Vacui, Elara realized, was an internal one. The void sought to exploit not just the emptiness in the world, but the potential for darkness within the human heart. The true miracle was the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for inner light to overcome even the most insidious shadows. The locket, once a target for corruption, was now a symbol of that resilience, a testament to the enduring power of hope and connection. The giggling silence was finally, truly broken by the quiet hum of a love that had conquered the void within.